One night, when we were 19 years old, my then-fiancée, Giovanna, woke up with an awful feeling that something terrible had happened to me. Against her wishes, I was making the 5-hour drive to see her after I'd finished the late shift at the movie theater where I worked. When she woke up, she looked at the clock. It was just after 1 a.m. We didn't have cell phones yet. She couldn't just call me, so she got on her knees and started to pray. About 15 minutes later, her phone rang. It was my mom. "Have you heard from Eric?" she asked her future daughter-in-law. "I just had the worst nightmare, and I need to know if he's okay." Then the two most important women in my life began to pray, together, over the phone, for my protection. As it turns out, I really needed those prayers. I shouldn't have been driving at all that night. I was too exhausted to make it. I had driven that same route 100 times, but this time, it lulled me to sleep. The last thing I remember was being a few miles outside of Lufkin, Texas, which would have been around 1 a.m. What happened next, I've never been able to explain. Not even when I was an atheist could I find a rational explanation for it. I woke up, slouched way down in the driver's seat, with my right hand resting in the 6th slot of the steering wheel. I was still driving. Granted, I was only going about 40 miles an hour on the highway, but still, it's better than being dead or stranded in a ditch. Here's the crazy part. I was in a completely different town, 30 miles away from the moment that I drifted off to sleep. When I came to, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I remember crying and saying thank you to God. I couldn't wait to tell Giovanna about this crazy thing that had happened to me, even if it meant that I would have to wake her up when I got there. But when I arrived, she came running out the front door in her pajamas at 3 a.m., and she gave me the biggest hug. I looked into her eyes and I could tell that she'd been crying. Before I could say anything, she said, "Come inside. Your mom's on the phone." A miracle is defined as a supernatural interruption in the natural order. Miracles can't be proven or disavowed by science. If they are true, they happen outside the laws of physics. For this reason, many people struggle to believe in the miraculous at all. They tend to see events like mine 20 years ago as coincidences and nothing more. But what about you? Do you believe in miracles? Today on Maybe God, 2 miraculous stories. First, a Nashville star whose journey inspires everyone around her to see God's miracles, even in life's most painful moments. Also, the miracle baby that many in Houston are celebrating this Christmas. Singer-songwriter Alisa Turner is a rising star in the Christian music world. In 2017, she signed with Integrity Music in Nashville, one of the largest labels of its kind in the world. And today, her music videos have over 3 million views on YouTube. Her hit song, Miracles, was even recognized by Christian music giants like Lauren Daigle. Alisa is not someone you'd expect to hear singing about miracles. When I heard her story for the first time, I remember thinking, wait, when's the miracle coming? God didn't show up when she needed him the most.
My life has been good. God has been good to me. Even though I will walk through life with a bit of a broken heart, I walk extraordinarily loved. And so I can promise you that whatever you are walking through, he has not forgotten you. He has great plans for you. He is still writing your story. Sometimes you have to remind yourself to find the joy. On the worst day of your life, find the joy, because he doesn't ever stop providing it.
A few weeks ago, Alisa flew from Nashville to Houston to lead music at my church. Physically, she doesn't demand an audience. She's really petite, and standing alone on that big stage, she almost looked frail. When she spoke, her voice was smooth and soft, like a whisper. I wondered if she would be able to hold the room's attention for the whole hour. And then she started to sing.
Yes, I believe in you. You're the God of miracles. You are due one today. I believe in you always. I believe in you.
When the last service was over, we invited Alisa into the Maybe God studio to share her heartbreaking but miraculous story with our podcast listeners, starting with the long road to becoming the accomplished artist and worship leader she is today.
I started when I was 15. I'm 35 now, so it took almost 20 years. So never give up on your dreams, kids.
Alisa grew up in North Carolina and spent most of her childhood at church with her father, who was a worship pastor. That means he led their congregation in worship through music every Sunday. Alisa says church felt more like home than anywhere else. She loved being a part of the music ministry, and most of all, she loved being with her father. From a young age, she was a self-proclaimed daddy's girl.
He was truly the greatest example of God's love. I had a lot of friends growing up who did not have great family situations or fathers that were really present. And so my dad kind of took in any and everybody. And so despite troubling times, hard times later on in my life, I can look back to my childhood and complete blessing to have my parents, and knowing that the way my dad loved me is like scratching the surface on the way my Heavenly Father loves me.
By the time Alisa was 12, she'd spend hours sitting at her piano, writing her own songs.
I loved the way music moved me, and so I just became like addicted to wanting that movement and that feel, and I wanted other people to feel it as well. It can evoke emotion, whether if it's a memory or happy or joy or sadness, but it helped me feel through things. So music became this processing. And, everyone has their outlet or avenue where, it's like how you vent or how you process things. So music became mine, even at an early age.
When Alisa turned 15, she was discovered by record executives in Nashville. At one point, they even talked to her about a possible development deal, but Alisa says the doors closed for her as quickly as they opened.
I remember, initially feeling devastated because you're young and you're like, oh my gosh, if they don't want me, who's going to want me? But I thought, no, this burning desire, this passion, this fire in me to do music would not go out. If it did, I would have just said, okay, I'll just pick a different profession or whatever. But it wouldn't go out no matter even when I wanted it to. So I thought, I'm going to have to just make this work. So I thought, well, the industry doesn't want much to do with me, so I'm just going to go out on the road and I'm going to build this with the people, because the people seem to always love what I was able to bring.
Alisa's family convinced her to go to college, but the 19-year-old just couldn't ignore that burning desire. Alisa wanted to be writing music and performing full-time. Before anyone could talk her out of it, she packed up her car, ditched college, and drove to Nashville.
I don't know how I did this, but I found my way. I always say, I'm going to find my way. And so I found a job and found some roommates and did the, starving artist truly, and putting demos on doorsteps and just playing literally for whoever would give me the time of day. But nothing like that first year that I went to Nashville, nothing really happened. And so it was discouraging, yet again, that fire in me to do what I was doing would not go out.
1 year into her first full-time attempt at launching her music career, Alisa faced her first devastating setback.
It was a Saturday evening, and I was at dinner at one of my dad's favorite restaurants, so I thought I should call him. We talked at least twice every day. And I said, hey, Dad, guess where I'm at? And it's this restaurant called Cookers, and we always went there just for the biscuits. And so we just chit-chatted, and it was totally normal. He hung up the phone, and I remember I walked across the street to the mall. And if you have ever been through trauma, you remember everything about it. But like the moment that I got a phone call from a hospital, I remember the store I was in. It was a Lady Foot Locker. I remember where I was at in the store. I remember the angle my body was. It's just crazy to me. And they said they're looking for a relative of Ross Turner. And I said, well, I'm his daughter. And they wouldn't tell me anything. They wanted to get in touch with my mom. And so I had to hang up the phone knowing that something was going on, but not knowing any details. And it was hours later, my brother finally called and said, Dad had a heart attack and he died. And it was just instant. So it was maybe 10 or 15 minutes after he and I talked. Apparently he started having chest pains. He drove to the hospital, which is down the street from the church, and he collapsed in the doorway. It's still so hard to process, like that whole life was here and now it's not. And I know where he is, and that's a beautiful gift and there's peace, but goodness, like the devastation and the gaping hole that grief just kind of fills up for a while. And I always reference to grief as like, initially it's like this elephant on your back where you are completely immobile and paralyzed. And eventually, you learn how to carry it. And so the elephant goes in your arms. And so it's still heavy, and it's still painful, and it hurts, and you don't quite know how to do it. But you never move on, but you start to learn how to move forward. And so with a lot of help from friends and family, and of course the Lord always watching over me, I found my way.
With that heavy grief, that elephant, now in her arms, Alisa packed up her car, and for the second time, she left North Carolina in search of an audience for her music.
I packed up my blue Honda CR-V and I went out on the road. And for the first 2 years after that, I basically lived in my Honda CR-V. I would shower at truck stations, which are surprisingly very clean. They provide you towels and all kinds of stuff. It's a little awkward. There's a waiting room at these like Flying J's where it's like full of truckers, and then it's you. And you're like, yes, I'm one of you. But, you make it work. I have so much joy in getting to do what I feel like I was built to do. And so that overrode anything else that was difficult through that season. And I got to love on people, and I got to share my story, and I got to hear theirs, and I got to sing songs over them or with them. And that, man, it just was the light of my life.
I'm going to go into a new song I'm going to teach you so that you can sing with me, and it's called As It Is in Heaven. And it was on a day when I was standing in a hallway and crying my eyes out because pain, I just dealt with pain for a long, long, long time, bone pain and other things like that.
2 years after her father's death, Alisa was still on the road, performing for anyone who would listen, when she began to experience some strange symptoms. First, she started forgetting the lyrics to her songs on stage. Then her words began to slur. Her health was getting worse and worse until she was finally forced to leave the road and go home. That's when she was diagnosed with Lyme disease.
Funny how a bug bite can kind of take you to death's door. I had been sick for a long, long time because I'd had the bug bite actually when I was a little girl. And we knew I had tick bites, but we didn't know that Lyme disease was a big thing. And we even had doctors say, if you haven't been to this part of the country, then don't worry about it. Well, that was very, very bad advice. Lyme disease is everywhere, all over the country, all over the world, in everybody's backyard. And so had I gotten diagnosed and treated right away, it would have been a month of doxycycline for 21 days of once a day. But by the time we finally diagnosed it, I was completely bedridden. I had to leave the road. I thought I would just go to some doctors, get some answers, and get back on my feet. But that was not the case. I got so sick. It's like almost like once I stopped what I was doing, it's like my body totally crashed. And it only got worse for a while. Even though we had the diagnosis, it was so tricky on how to treat it. It had atrophied my muscles, so I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't swallow, I had a feeding tube. I mean, everything had to be done for me. So I kind of laid there like a vegetable. Had it gotten any worse, they would have put me on more of a breathing tube. I mean, just everything in me was growing weaker.
Alisa was bedridden for 3 years, housebound for another 2. Doctors tried everything: IV antibiotics, immune therapies, even drugs used in chemotherapy patients. After years of very slow progress, Alisa was finally able to get out of bed and back on her feet.
I have enough fight in me to get up and walk through the days that are still filled with pain, but not total dysfunction. So I have these few sayings that I say to other people, but I mostly say to myself. I say, whatever it takes, I will do whatever it takes, and just keep going. Even if you don't know why, or you don't feel like what you're going to keep going into is that you have any idea how to do, I'm going to show up. I'm just going to keep going and know that the Lord will meet me in it.
Alisa still struggles daily with the effects of Lyme disease. On her Facebook page, it's not uncommon to see a photo of her sprawled out on a couch backstage in between shows. People ask her all the time, how do you still believe in God? Why aren't you angry with him?
Let me just say, I've been very angry. I have cursed the heavens. I mean, I've had an absolute temper tantrum. And it's so funny. Anytime I go through that, it almost feels like I go into this childlike state of like, just anger and irrational feelings and fears. And then it's like, once I'm done, I feel like the Lord's like, you're okay now? Okay. All right. Well, let's stand up and let's keep moving forward. I mean, let's just not make a big scene. There's just something I know. It's like something in my gut that I just don't doubt it. I know, I just have this understanding that life is hard, but God is still good. And life is going to throw you a lot of things that are hard to walk through, but God is there to walk you through it. And so it doesn't mean it takes it away or that God's going to prevent certain things, although I have no idea how much God probably has intervened. We'll never know that. It's almost like a father and a child or a baby. I mean, how many things did your parents do for you when you were a baby that we have no memory or recollection of? So I know he has taken care of me far more than I'm humanly able to even grasp. But I know that life is going to be hard. I just know that it's not God sitting up there in the heavens saying, I'm going to put you through this and then that, and you're going to learn this. And by all means, the Lord does teach us things through our hard times. But I feel like some people think God purposely says, okay, now it's your time I really want to run you through the mud so I can teach you something. He's going to redeem it. But he's not up there with this big, crazy plan. He's right there with you in the dirt, in the worst days of your life. And he's just going to keep ushering you through it.
Alisa doesn't believe that God gave her Lyme disease, but she does believe that he brought joy into her darkness. Just when she was able to restart her life and begin thinking about her career again, she met Jaime, who's now her husband.
It takes a lot for someone to come stand by your side when you're that unwell and to start life with you. And so it was, very difficult those early years. We didn't get any kind of a honeymoon period. I mean, it was hard stuff right at the top, but there was still a lot of good. And I said it in service, that find the joy. There's always something to be thankful for. And so I was thankful to not go at it alone.
Now, this is one of the hardest parts of Alisa's story. I know this is the part I struggle with the most. Trying to understand how and why God didn't prevent her from experiencing heartache over and over again. But what stands out about Alisa is how she continued to find the joy in her pain, even to see the miracle in this next part of her story. Within a year of getting married, the newlyweds found out Alisa was pregnant, even though doctors told her she'd never be able to conceive.
Huge surprise, because from the damage that Lyme had done to my body, we thought, the doctors had told us that there's no way you can get pregnant. So huge surprise, both like excitement and absolute terror, because you're like, wasn't expecting that, have no idea how to do this. But again, I mean, it's a baby. And he made me a mom. And early in that pregnancy, we found out that he had a birth defect. And we knew very early on that when he would be born, he would pass. So we were given this kind of decision to make, like, do you want to go through with the pregnancy even though you know what's going to happen, or do you want to just go ahead and end it now? And the doctor we had at the time had never had someone want to carry a child, but I had to figure out what I had peace about. And at the end of the day, I knew, as horrific as it would be in some ways, that I want to keep him as long as I can, even if it's just me getting to know him while he's in my belly. Because in the belly, he was safe. He was still forming and growing and things like that, and I felt him move, and so I cherished it. It was such a perspective shift. I had to start looking at not just what would be in some ways taken away, but I had to look at what had been given. And I had all this time left before I gave birth, and I felt like a ticking time bomb. As soon as I would go into labor, he would start to die. So that was the most, I don't know how you manage it, an emotion or a thought like that. You kind of go into survival mode for a long time. But I knew I was just going to embrace anything I could from it. And again, he made me a mom. And so I wouldn't take that back for anything. And I got to love him for the time I had him.
Jaime and Alisa named their baby boy London. After his birth, London lived only 71 minutes and took his last breath in Alisa's arms.
And I always say it's the best and worst day of my life. And I remember when the nurse came around every couple of minutes, took his pulse, and I'd always watch her finger because it would go with the rhythm of his pulse. And the very last time she came, her finger didn't move. And it's like you hear this big gasp in the room, and you could just feel everybody's hearts completely shatter, as well as mine did. But I always remember looking up at that moment, and you could not have fit another person in that hospital room. And I thought, goodness, when you have that many people say, hey, I'll show up and be with you in the worst moment of your life, that is why God is still good. Because he has surrounded me, beyond surrounded me, and then double, triple layered it with people to walk with me through this, to just love me. And so, still hardest day of my life. I think my biggest breakdown moment of that was being wheeled out of the hospital, and I just completely lost it. It felt very empty for what should have been there. But God still redeems, and he has still brought peace despite the sadness being there. And again, that elephant on my back that I've learned how to move with, and know that though I walk with a bit of a shaky, broken heart, which will always be, I have so many blessings, and I take that with me too.
For anyone who's prayed 1,000 prayers and still can't find the answer anywhere, fighting off the lie that no one cares. For anyone who's out there.
Alisa admits that sometimes it feels like her prayers to God have gone unanswered. But instead of fixating on the times she's felt disappointed by God, she chooses to focus on all the ways God has provided for her, taken care of her, and mended her broken heart. A few years ago, Alisa moved back to Nashville for the third time, carrying an even larger elephant in her arms, but with more fight in her than ever before. Nearly 20 years after that first attempt to launch her music career, she was signed to Integrity Music. In May of 2018, she released her first album, and today she's traveling the country, sharing her music and her story, hoping to show people how God's greatest miracles aren't the times when someone prays and he supernaturally intervenes. The best miracles are the ones no one ever asks for, but everyone receives. Existence itself is miraculous. Every life, no matter how long or short, is itself a miracle. Human life, with our self-awareness and our ability to conceive of meaning and purpose, is especially miraculous. And then there is the most powerful word in the world, love. Love has no explanation. It just is. The near universal human experience with the transcendent love of God might be the greatest miracle of all.
I think I sing to him because it's the way I say I love you. I think worship is one of the most beautiful sounds he will ever hear. And so if I can do that all my days, I feel like I've loved him back well for all the ways that he's loved me when I didn't love him, when I didn't want anything to do with him, when I felt like he let me down. He just stood there. He never walked away. He doesn't abandon his children even when you don't realize he's there. And so now that I have kind of come full circle through a lot of those hard things, I'm not letting go of him ever. And if I can tell him every single day that I love him, whether if it's through my words, through my prayer, through my worship, I'm not going to miss a chance to do it. He deserves it.
All of your days, may God give you eyes to see, still greater courage to rise and believe He's able. May God be your peace in the fire you're walking through. This is my prayer now. This is my prayer for you.
There's something about a newborn baby that feels like hope. Alisa showed us how, even if you're only able to hold your baby for a short time, it's a miracle. At my church, The Story Houston, we're celebrating our own little miracle this Christmas. 8-week-old baby Peyton. His parents, Preston and Brooke, have been coming to The Story for 2 years.
Cool.
You hear us talking about you, huh?
My pregnancy was really easy. I mean, it was great, I felt like. And then my 20-week ultrasound, which actually I ended up postponing, I think it was 2 or 3 times till I was like 23 weeks, and they were like, you can't postpone it anymore because he had to travel for work. And I felt like that was a huge God thing because for some reason I really wanted him there, and I don't know why. I think it's because God knew that I was about to hear some tough news and couldn't handle it without him there. So I'm gonna get emotional talking about this.
23 weeks into what seemed like a healthy pregnancy, doctors told Brooke and Preston that their first child had a serious and rare condition called transposition of the great arteries, which means that the 2 main arteries leaving his heart were reversed.
There's about 2,000 babies a year in the U.S. born with this condition. And it just means that the heart would continue to circulate deoxygenated blood. So instead of bringing new oxygenated blood into the circulatory system, that kind of just circles in one loop, and the blood that's going through the body continues to circle and doesn't get new oxygen.
If Peyton had been born 30 years ago, he wouldn't have made it more than a year. But thanks to modern medicine, this birth defect is no longer a death sentence. But it does involve open heart surgery almost immediately after birth.
Pregnancy has always kind of scared me. So we had been praying together every night prior to then. Then after we found out this diagnosis, he would call me at work and we'd pray together in the middle of the day. We would pray together at breakfast. We'd pray pretty much all day, every day.
Brooke and Preston weren't the only ones praying. By the time Peyton was born, they believe over 1,000 people were praying for them, many of them complete strangers who had heard their story on social media or through their churches. On October 18, 2018, Peyton was born by C-section. Brooke and Preston weren't able to hold him. While Brooke was still recovering on the operating room table, Preston followed doctors as they raced baby Peyton to the cardiovascular ICU.
Couldn't hold him because he's in,
Yeah.
kind of an incubator, being surrounded by a bunch of cords and has different IVs going in him and things like that. So it's tough to see because you want to do something about it, but you can't, and you kind of feel helpless in the circumstance.
But he would give us some encouragement. When Preston or I would put our hand out, he would squeeze our hand. So even though he was like completely sedated and very out of it, it was like that was his way of saying, I'm okay. And so that gave us a lot of comfort. And I think that was God showing us the light at the end of the tunnel through Peyton, just saying, it's okay, you're gonna get through this.
Baby Peyton spent 4 days heavily sedated in the ICU, breathing through tubes. Monday morning, nurses prepped him for open heart surgery. 2 of the best pediatric heart surgeons in the country were assigned to Peyton's case. Some may call that luck, but Brooke and Preston knew that was part of God's plan.
You're kind of just praying the whole time because you don't know what else you can do. And for someone who likes to control things, you kind of feel totally helpless, which is a weird feeling.
We both have always said, give it up to God, give it up to God, but it's easier to say and think that you're giving it up to God, and then when you actually go through something like this, it really, really is completely out of your control. There's nothing you can do you really do have to give it up to God. I couldn't get myself through this. I couldn't rely on my husband to get me through this or the words of other people to console me and comfort me. The only thing that comforted me was knowing that this was all in God's hands. So knowing that brought us a lot of comfort and peace.
Peyton's surgery lasted several hours. When the doctors came out, they reported that the surgery had gone well and his heart was healing faster than expected.
Obviously, the doctors and nurses and surgeons played a huge role in the success of his surgery and all of that, but they said that they had never seen a baby de-escalate so quickly after surgery, meaning he was off of all of his pain meds within, a couple days, which is just apparently unheard of. And also, I think he was a 9-pound, 8-ounce baby, so he was a really big baby. And I think God knew what he was doing there, too. I think that there was a reason that he was so big to kind of help strengthen him for his recovery. Peyton's story is a huge testament to the power of prayer. I had never witnessed anything like that firsthand. It was miracle after miracle after miracle.
Even doctors and nurses called Peyton's recovery miraculous. He was released from the hospital a week early without pain medication. And today, aside from a scar over his heart, there's no way of telling this little 8-week-old has been through so much in his short life.
He's just so alert and so aware and squawks and screams like a normal baby. And when I look at him, I just think he's a true example of God's miracles.
Brooke and Preston have been believers their whole lives, but this experience has strengthened their relationship with God. Witnessing God's miracles in their own lives made their prayer life less of a routine. Now they realize how much their family needs God's intervention. Baby Peyton's story also continues to inspire everyone who prayed for him. Just a few weeks ago, Brooke was running errands around Houston when she was approached by a total stranger who recognized her as Peyton's mom.
It's just encouraging to know that so many people were praying for this little guy, and I really don't know that we would be here today if it hadn't been for the power of prayer.
Peyton's story is a miracle, an answered prayer. Stories like his are the ones that warm our hearts and give us hope. But Alisa is convinced that her baby, London, was a miracle too, even though the outcome was much different. A skeptic might hear that and say, Christians can't have it both ways. You can't get away with calling answered prayers and unanswered prayers miracles. It's got to be one or the other. But I'm not so sure. If existence is miraculous, then all existence is miraculous. If life is a miracle, then every life is a miracle. Miracles can't be defined by outcomes or circumstances when every breath you take is a miraculous gift. Walt Whitman, the great American poet, once wrote, "Why, who makes much of a miracle? But for me, I know of nothing else but miracles. Every hour of light and dark is a miracle." Miracles happen every day. Seeing the miracles is a choice we all get to make. This Christmas, I hope you'll choose to see the miracles of life and love all around you.
The one who made the blind to see is moving here in front of me, moving here in front of me. The one who made the deaf to hear is silencing my every fear, silencing my every fear. I believe in you, I believe in you. You're the God of miracles. I believe in you, I believe in you. You're the God of miracles. The one who does impossible is reaching out to make me whole, reaching out to make me whole. The one who put death in its place, his life is flowing through my veins, his life is flowing through my veins. I believe in you, I believe in you. You're the God of miracles. I believe in you, I believe in you. You're the God of miracles.
Maybe God is produced by Julie Murley-Coultois and associate producer Brandon Duke. Our editor is Brittany Holland, and the sound engineer is Aubrey Snyder. The Maybe God theme song was composed by Nathan Bonus. To download Alisa Turner's debut album, Miracle or Not, go to her website, alisaturner.com, and check out our brand new website at maybegodpod.com for more information about any of our episodes. While you're there, send us your doubts, questions, or feedback. And don't forget to spread the word about Maybe God by leaving a review wherever you listen to us. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays, and we'll be back in early 2019 with a brand new season.